Speculation is rising. Could Edgar Lungu's body return to Zambia just before the 2026 elections? Some say it's coincidence. Others believe it's a political strategy. What is PF planning? And how is the government responding? This report breaks it all down. There are growing rumors that the body of former Zambian President Edgar Chagwa Lungu *** may return to Zambia shortly before the 2026 general election. Political analysts and PF insiders are now questioning whether the delay in burial is part of a larger campaign strategy meant to stir public emotion and influence voters. In this exclusive video by InspirAfrica official, we reveal what PF sources are saying behind the scenes, what the Lungu family has confirmed or denied, how the government and UPND are reacting, what this could mean for the 2026 election outcome. The truth is deeper than headlines. Watch now. 1. What PF sources are saying behind the scenes. The Patriotic Front, PF, Zambia's former ruling party, has been a significant political force, particularly under the leadership of former President Edgar Lungu, who served from 2015 to 2021. Following Lungu's reported death in 2025, as referenced in X posts, there has been considerable speculation about the internal dynamics of the PF, especially regarding its strategy and leadership transitions ahead of the 2026 general elections. Behind-the-scenes discussions within the PF are inherently difficult to verify, as they involve private conversations, factional negotiations, and strategic planning not typically disclosed publicly. However, I can piece together insights from public statements, X posts, and political analysis to infer what PF sources might be discussing privately. Public statements from PF leadership. According to X posts, PF acting President Given Labinda has been a key figure in communicating the party's position, particularly regarding funeral arrangements for Edgar Lungu. For instance, Labinda stated that the government was in contact with the Lungu family and the PF, indicating that the party was involved in discussions about the state funeral. However, subsequent posts suggest tensions, as the Lungu family and PF reportedly disagreed with the government over control of the funeral arrangements, particularly whether the government should take over from South Africa or only upon the body's arrival in Lusaka, This suggests that behind closed doors, PF leaders are likely grappling with how to balance respect for Lungu's legacy with maintaining political leverage against the ruling United Party for National Development (UPND). Inferred behind-the-scenes discussions. Leadership vacuum and succession. Edgar Lungu was a central figure in the PF, and his death creates a significant leadership gap. Behind the scenes, PF sources are likely debating who will emerge as the party's new figurehead. Potential candidates include Given Labinda, who is currently acting president, or other prominent figures like Chishimba Kambwili or Miles Sampa, who have previously vied for influence within the party. The choice of a new leader is critical, as it will shape the PF strategy for 2026. Internal factions may be aligning, with some pushing for a unifying candidate to consolidate Lungu's base, while others might advocate for a more confrontational figure to challenge the UPND aggressively. Funeral as a political tool. The disagreement over funeral arrangements suggests that PF sources are strategizing how to use Lungu's death to rally supporters. Funerals of prominent leaders in Zambia, such as those of Michael Sata or Levi Mwanawasa, have historically been moments of political mobilization. PF insiders might be discussing how to frame the funeral as a show of strength, portraying the government's involvement as overreach to galvanize anti-UPND sentiment. The family's reported resistance to government-led arrangements, could be a coordinated effort with PF leaders to maintain control over the narrative. Electoral strategy. With the 2026 elections looming, PF sources are likely assessing how Lungu's death impacts their electoral prospects. Lungu's charisma and populist appeal were key to the PF's voter base, particularly in urban and Copperbelt regions. Behind closed doors, PF leaders may be discussing how to preserve this base without Lungu, possibly by invoking his legacy or aligning with regional allies like traditional leaders or religious groups. They might also be exploring alliances with other opposition parties to counter the UPND's dominance. Challenges in verifying behind-the-scenes talks. The lack of direct access to private PF communications means that much of this analysis is inferential. X posts provide some clues, but they are often biased or incomplete. For example, posts by @Joseph_Kalimbwi suggest a narrative critical of the Lungu family's decisions, which may reflect UPND-aligned perspectives rather than PF's internal views. To critically examine the narrative, we must consider that PF sources might be intentionally leaking selective information to shape public perception or pressure the government. Without corroborated evidence, claims about PF's internal discussions remain speculative. Broader political context. The PF's internal dynamics are shaped by Zambia's polarized political landscape. The party's loss in the 2021 elections to Hakainde Hichilema's UPND was a blow, and Lungu's death further weakens its position. Behind the scenes, PF leaders are likely strategizing how to rebuild trust among supporters disillusioned by the 2021 defeat and economic challenges under UPND governance. They may also be discussing how to exploit any government missteps, such as perceived insensitivity in handling Lungu's funeral, to regain political ground. 2. What the Lungu family has confirmed or denied. The Lungu family's role in the events following Edgar Lungu's death has been a focal point of public and political attention, as evidenced by X posts. Their statements and actions, often channeled through PF representatives like Given Labinda, reflect their desire to maintain control over the former president's legacy and funeral arrangements. Below, I outline what the family has confirmed or denied based on available information, primarily from X posts, and provide context for their position. Confirmed by the Lungu family. Disagreement with government on funeral arrangements. The Lungu family, through Given Labinda, confirmed their preference for the government to take over funeral arrangements only when Lungu's body arrives in Lusaka rather than from South Africa, where he reportedly died. This suggests the family wants to maintain some autonomy over the process, possibly to ensure the funeral aligns with their wishes or PF's political objectives. Uncertainty about body repatriation timeline. The family, via Labinda, stated that it was unclear when Lungu's body would arrive in Zambia, contradicting the government's announcement of a specific arrival date. This indicates a deliberate effort to control the narrative around the funeral's timing and logistics. Change in burial plans. The family announced they would not transport Lungu's body to Lusaka as initially planned, citing issues with President Hichilema leading the body viewing process. This suggests a deeper rift, possibly rooted in distrust or differing views on how Lungu's legacy should be honored. Plans for burial in Johannesburg. Posts indicate that the family intended to bury Lungu in Johannesburg, a decision that prompted legal action from the Zambian government. While not explicitly confirmed in their own words, the family's actions imply they were prepared to proceed with a foreign burial until the South African court intervened. Denied or contested by the Lungu family. Engagement with the government. President Hichilema claimed that the Lungu family refused to engage with him and his team on the day Lungu died. While the family has not explicitly denied this, their actions, such as resisting government-led funeral arrangements, suggest they are wary of ceding control to the UPND administration. This could be interpreted as an implicit denial of cooperative engagement. Government's narrative on repatriation. The family's insistence on controlling the repatriation process from South Africa effectively denies the government's assertion that it should oversee the entire process. This standoff indicates a rejection of the government's proposed protocol for a state funeral. Context and analysis. The Lungu family's actions reflect a complex interplay of personal grief, political loyalty, and strategic maneuvering. Edgar Lungu was not only a former president, but also a polarizing figure whose tenure was marked by economic challenges and allegations of authoritarianism. The family's resistance to government involvement may stem from distrust of the UPND, which defeated Lungu in 2021 and has since pursued policies critical of his administration. The decision to consider a burial in Johannesburg is particularly significant, as it deviates from Zambia's tradition of repatriating and burying former presidents on home soil, as seen with Michael Sata and Levi Mwanawasa. The family's alignment with PF leaders like Given Labinda suggests they are working closely with the party to shape the narrative around Lungu's death. This could be a deliberate strategy to maintain Lungu's political legacy as a rallying point for PF supporters. However, the claim about Lungu using a Zimbabwean passport to check into a South African hospital introduces a controversial element that the family has not directly addressed. If true, this could complicate their position, raising questions about Lungu's status and the family's credibility. Critical examination. The X posts provide a glimpse into the family's stance, but are filtered through external perspectives, some of which may be biased. For example, at Joseph_Kalimbwi's posts, appear critical of the family, suggesting they are obstructing the government's efforts. This narrative may align with UPND's interests, and the family's silence on certain allegations, e.g., the Zimbabwean passport, leaves room for speculation. Without direct statements from the family, we must treat some claims as inconclusive, particularly those that lack corroboration from multiple sources. 3. How the government and UPND are reacting. The Zambian government, led by President Hakainde Hichilema and the UPND, has been actively involved in responding to Edgar Lungu's death and the subsequent disputes over his funeral. The government's actions reflect a delicate balance between respecting protocol for a former head of state and navigating political tensions with the PF and Lungu's family. Below, I detail the government's and UPND's reactions based on X posts and broader political context. Government's official response. Engagement with the Lungu family and PF. The government, through statements attributed to Given Labinda, confirmed it was in contact with the Lungu family and PF to arrange a state funeral. This aligns with Zambia's tradition of honoring former presidents with state-organized funerals, as seen with Michael Sata in 2014. Proposal to repatriate Lungu's body. The government expressed its intent to take over funeral arrangements from South Africa and repatriate Lungu's body to Zambia. This suggests an effort to assert control over the process, likely to ensure a dignified state funeral that reflects national unity. Legal action against foreign burial. When the Lungu family planned to bury Lungu in Johannesburg, the government challenged this decision in a South African court, leading to a suspension of the burial until July 18, 2025. This legal move underscores the government's determination to ensure Lungu's burial occurs in Zambia, possibly to avoid political backlash or the perception of losing control over a national figure's legacy. Hichilema's public statements. President Hichilema stated that the Lungu family refused to engage with him on the day of Lungu's death, emphasizing that the government was still attempting to negotiate despite resistance. This portrays the government as cooperative, but frustrated by the family's stance. UPND's political reaction. The UPND, as the ruling party, has a vested interest in managing the political fallout from Lungu's death. While official UPND statements are not directly cited in the ex-posts, the party's perspective can be inferred from government actions and posts by UPND-aligned individuals like at Joseph_Kalimbwe. Key reactions include framing the family's resistance as obstructionist. Posts by at Joseph_Kalimbwe suggest that the UPND views the Lungu family's decisions, such as refusing to transport the body to Lusaka or choosing a Johannesburg burial, as politically motivated and disrespectful to national traditions. Post 2. This narrative aims to paint the family and PF as uncooperative, potentially to sway public opinion in UPND's favor. Leveraging the funeral for political capital. The UPND likely sees the state funeral as an opportunity to demonstrate leadership and national unity. By insisting on a Zambia-based burial, the party aims to project an image of respect for Lungu's legacy while countering PF's attempts to politicize the event. Critical analysis. The government's proactive stance, including legal action in South Africa, suggests a strategic effort to control the narrative around Lungu's death. However, the UPND's approach risks alienating PF supporters, who may perceive the government's actions as heavy-handed or disrespectful to Lungu's family. The claim about Lungu using a Zimbabwean passport is particularly contentious, as it could be a government attempt to discredit Lungu's legacy or justify its intervention, but it lacks corroboration and should be treated as speculative. The UPND's reaction also reflects the broader political rivalry with the PF. By emphasizing the family's refusal to cooperate, the government may be attempting to shift blame for any delays or controversies onto the PF and Lungu's family, thereby deflecting criticism of its own handling of the situation. However, this strategy could backfire if public sentiment views the government as exploiting a sensitive moment for political gain. 4. What this could mean for the 2026 election outcome. The death of Edgar Lungu and the surrounding controversies have significant implications for Zambia's 2026 general elections. As a former president and PF leader, Lungu was a polarizing yet influential figure whose absence reshapes the political landscape. Below, I analyze how these events could influence the election outcome, considering voter sentiment, party dynamics, and strategic shifts. Impact on the PF. Leadership crisis. Lungu's death creates a leadership vacuum within the PF, which could weaken its electoral prospects. The party must select a new presidential candidate capable of unifying its factions and retaining Lungu's voter base, particularly in urban areas like Lusaka and the Copperbelt. A divisive leadership contest could fragment the party, reducing its competitiveness against the UPND. Mobilization of sympathy votes. Lungu's death could galvanize PF supporters, especially if the party frames the government's handling of the funeral as disrespectful. Funerals of prominent leaders often evoke strong emotions, and the PF could use this to rally its base, portraying Lungu as a martyr of UPND's alleged vendetta. However, this strategy's success depends on the PF's ability to present a cohesive front and a compelling candidate. Impact on the UPND. Opportunity to consolidate power. The UPND, under Hichilema, may benefit from Lungu's absence, as he was a formidable opponent who could mobilize anti-UPND sentiment. If the government handles the funeral respectfully and avoids perceptions of overreach, it could project an image of maturity and unity, appealing to moderate voters. Risk of backlash. The government's legal action against the Lungu family and public criticisms, e.g., could alienate voters who view these moves as insensitive. If the PF successfully frames the UPND as exploiting Lungu's death for political gain, it could erode Hichilema's support, particularly among undecided voters or those sympathetic to Lungu. Voter sentiment and regional dynamics. Zambia's electorate is divided along regional and ethnic lines, with the PF traditionally strong in Bemba-speaking regions, northern Luapula and Copperbelt, and the UPND dominant in southern and western provinces. Lungu's death could intensify these divisions, with PF supporters rallying around his legacy in their strongholds. However, economic performance will likely be the deciding factor in 2026. If the UPND delivers on its promises of economic recovery, job creation, and debt restructuring, it could mitigate the PF's sympathy-driven campaign. Conversely, persistent economic challenges, such as high living costs or unemployment, could fuel anti-incumbency sentiment, benefiting the PF or other opposition parties. Potential scenarios for 2026. UPND victory. If the UPND maintains economic stability and neutralizes the PF's narrative, it could secure a second term for Hichilema. A unified PF candidate who fails to match Lungu's charisma could struggle to challenge the incumbents. PF resurgence. A strong PF candidate who leverages Lungu's legacy and capitalizes on government missteps could mount a competitive challenge. This scenario is more likely if the UPND faces economic setbacks or public discontent over its handling of Lungu's funeral. Third-party emergence. The controversy surrounding Lungu's death could create space for a third-party candidate or coalition to emerge, appealing to voters disillusioned with both the UPND and PF. However, Zambia's two-party dominance makes this less likely. Critical analysis. The ex-posts suggest a polarized narrative, with UPND-aligned voices criticizing the PF and Lungu's family, while PF-aligned sources emphasize government overreach. This polarization could deepen voter divisions, making the 2026 election highly competitive. However, the impact of Lungu's death will depend on how both parties navigate the next year, including their ability to address economic concerns and unify their bases. 5. Rumors of Lungu's return before elections. The query about rumors of Lungu's return before elections appears to be a misinterpretation or speculative question, given that the ex-posts confirm Edgar Lungu's death in 2025. However, I'll address the possibility of such rumors, their potential origins, and their implications, while clarifying that Lungu's death makes a literal return impossible. Clarifying the rumor. No credible evidence from the provided ex-posts or other sources suggests that Lungu is alive or planning a political return. The posts consistently refer to his death, funeral arrangements, and related disputes, e.g., rumors of a return could stem from misinformation or conspiracy theories. In polarized political environments, conspiracy theories about a leader's death are common. Some PF supporters might speculate that Lungu is alive, possibly to maintain hope or destabilize the UPND's narrative. The claim about a Zimbabwean passport could fuel such theories, though it remains unverified. Symbolic return. The return might refer to Lungu's legacy being invoked by the PF as a rallying point for the 2026 elections. The party could campaign on his policies or portray a new candidate as his successor, creating the perception of a return. Implications of such rumors. If rumors of Lungu's return circulate, they could energize PF supporters. False hope of Lungu's return could boost PF morale, mobilizing voters who remain loyal to his legacy. However, this risks disillusionment if the rumor is debunked. Undermine UPND credibility. If the UPND fails to counter such rumors effectively, it could face accusations of concealing information or mishandling Lungu's death, eroding public trust. Fuel political instability. Unverified rumors could exacerbate tensions between PF and UPND supporters, potentially leading to protests or violence, as seen in past Zambian elections. Critical analysis. The absence of credible evidence for Lungu's return suggests this is a speculative or fringe narrative. The focus on his death and funeral arrangements in ex-posts indicates that both the government and PF accept his passing as fact. Any rumors of a return should be treated with skepticism, as they may be driven by political agendas rather than evidence. 6. Timeline. From death to burial delay. Overview and context. Approximate 2,000 words. The timeline of events from Edgar Lungu's death to the delay in his burial is reconstructed based on ex-posts, which provide a chronological account of key developments. Below, I outline the timeline and analyze the reasons for the burial delay. Timeline of events. June 6, 2025. PF Acting President Given Labinda announces that the government is in contact with the Lungu family and PF regarding funeral arrangements for a state funeral. June 7, 2025. A stalemate emerges between the government and the Lungu family. The family wants the government to take over funeral arrangements only when Lungu's body reaches Lusaka, while the government insists on controlling the process from South Africa. June 9, 2025. The Lungu family, via Labinda, states that the timeline for repatriating Lungu's body is unclear, contradicting the government's announced arrival date. June 18, 2025. The family announces they will not transport Lungu's body to Lusaka, citing issues with President Hichilema leading the body viewing process. June 24, 2025. President Hichilema reveals that the Lungu family refused to engage with him on the day of Lungu's death. The government takes the family to court in South Africa to challenge their decision to bury Lungu in Johannesburg, June 25, 2025. A South African court suspends Lungu's burial in Johannesburg until July 18, 2025, following the Zambian government's challenge. Concerns arise about Lungu using a Zimbabwean passport to check into a South African hospital, Reasons for burial delay. Dispute over control. The primary reason for the delay is the disagreement between the Lungu family and the government over who should control the funeral arrangements. The family's resistance to government involvement from South Africa and their preference for a Lusaka-based process reflect distrust or a desire to maintain autonomy. Political tensions. The PF and Lungu family's actions suggest a strategic effort to politicize the funeral, possibly to rally supporters or criticize the UPND. The government's legal action in South Africa indicates its determination to ensure a Zambia-based burial, likely to avoid political fallout, Legal intervention. The South African court's decision to suspend the burial until July 18, 2025, introduced a legal delay as the court addresses the government's challenge and the passport issue. Critical analysis. The timeline reveals a complex interplay of grief, politics, and protocol. The government's insistence on a state funeral aligns with tradition, but has been met with resistance, suggesting deeper mistrust between the UPND and PF. The passport controversy, while unverified, adds an unexpected layer to the delay, raising questions about Lungu's status in South Africa at the time of his death. 7. Political reactions and PF statements. Overview and context. Approximate 2,000 words. Political reactions to Edgar Lungu's death and the subsequent controversies involve a range of actors, including including the PF, UPND, and other stakeholders. Below, I summarize key reactions and PF statements based on ex-posts and contextual analysis. PF statements and reactions. Given Lubinda's role as PF acting president, Lubinda has been the primary spokesperson, confirming government contact for funeral arrangements and highlighting the family's preference for control in Lusaka. He also contradicted the government's timeline for body repatriation, signaling PF's intent to challenge the UPND's narrative. Politicization of the funeral. The PF, through the Lungu family's actions, appears to be using the funeral to mobilize supporters. The decision to consider a Johannesburg burial and resist government involvement suggests a strategy to portray the UPND as disrespectful or authoritarian. UPND and government reactions. Hichilema's statements. President Hichilema emphasized the government's attempts to engage the Lungu family, framing their refusal as uncooperative. This positions the UPND as respectful of protocol while deflecting blame for delays. Legal action. The government's decision to take the Lungu family to court in South Africa, reflects a proactive approach to ensure a Zambia-based burial likely to maintain national unity and counter PF's narrative. Other political actors. Opposition voices. While not directly cited in the ex-posts, other opposition parties may weigh in, either supporting the PF stance to form a broader anti-UPND coalition or distancing themselves to avoid association with the controversy. Public figures and media. Posts by @Crizzledalewis highlight the drama surrounding the burial, indicating media interest in the story. This suggests that public figures are amplifying the issue, influencing public perception. Critical analysis. The PF statements aim to maintain control over Lungu's legacy, while the UPND seeks to project leadership and unity. The polarized reactions reflect Zambia's broader political divide, with both parties using the situation to appeal to their bases ahead of 2026. 8. Emotional impact on Zambians. Overview and context. Approximate 2,000 words. Edgar Lungu's death is a significant event for Zambians, given his status as a former president and a polarizing figure. The emotional impact varies across political affiliations, regions, and socio-economic groups. Below, I analyze the likely emotional responses based on Zambia's political and social context. Supporters of PF and Lungu. Grief and nostalgia. Lungu supporters, particularly in PF strongholds like the Copperbelt and northern provinces, likely feel deep grief over his loss. His populist style and infrastructure projects during his tenure resonated with many urban voters, and his death may evoke nostalgia for his presidency. Anger and frustration. The disputes over funeral arrangements and the government's legal action may fuel anger among PF supporters, who may perceive the UPND as disrespecting Lungu's legacy, UPND supporters and critics of Lungu. Mixed emotions. UPND supporters may feel ambivalence, acknowledging Lungu's role as a former president while remaining critical of his governance, which was marked by economic challenges and allegations of corruption. Some may view his death as closing a contentious chapter. Sympathy with caveats. Moderate UPND supporters may express sympathy for the Lungu family, but support the government's efforts to ensure a state funeral, seeing it as a matter of national protocol. General public. National mourning. Regardless of political affiliation, many Zambians likely feel a sense of national loss, as the death of a former president is a rare and somber event. Past funerals, like Michael Sata's, saw widespread mourning, and Lungu's death likely evokes similar sentiments. Polarization and tension. The controversy surrounding the funeral, amplified by posts like @Joseph_Kalimbwis, may deepen divisions, with some Zambians feeling torn between loyalty to Lungu's legacy and support for the government's actions. Critical analysis. The emotional impact is shaped by Zambia's polarized political climate. The PF's ability to channel grief into political mobilization and the UPND's handling of the funeral will influence how these emotions translate into voter behavior in 2026. 9. Is this a strategy or coincidence? Overview and context. Approximate 2,000 words. The question of whether the controversies surrounding Lungu's death and funeral are a deliberate strategy or a coincidence requires examining the motivations of key actors, the Lungu family, PF, and UPND. Below, I analyze the evidence and context to determine the likelihood of strategic intent. Evidence of strategy. Lungu family and PF. The family's resistance to government-led funeral arrangements and their initial plan to bury Lungu in Johannesburg, suggest a coordinated effort to maintain control over the process. This could be a PF strategy to politicize the funeral, framing the UPND as overreaching to rally supporters. UPND and government. The government's legal action in South Africa and Hichilema's public statements, indicate a strategic response to ensure a Zambia-based burial likely to project unity and counter PF's narrative. The emphasis on protocol suggests an intent to neutralize political fallout. Evidence of coincidence. Logistical challenges. Disagreements over repatriation and burial could stem from genuine logistical or emotional concerns rather than political motives. The family's distrust of the government may reflect personal grief rather than a calculated strategy. External factors. The South African court's intervention and the passport controversy were likely unforeseen, suggesting that some delays are coincidental rather than planned. Critical analysis. The evidence leans toward a mix of strategy strategy and coincidence. The PF and Lungu family's actions suggest an intent to leverage the funeral for political gain, while the UPND's response aims to mitigate this. However, logistical and legal complications may have escalated the situation beyond either side's initial plans. 10. What experts say about the timing. Overview and context. Approximate 2,000 words. No direct expert opinions are cited in the provided X posts, but I can infer likely perspectives based on political analysts' typical approaches to such events in Zambia. Below, I outline what experts might say about the timing of Lungu's death and the funeral controversies. Expert perspectives. Political timing. Analysts might argue that Lungu's death, occurring just over a year before the 2026 elections, is politically significant. It provides the PF an opportunity to rally supporters, but also risks internal disarray if leadership disputes emerge. Funeral as a flashpoint. Experts may view the funeral disputes as a microcosm of Zambia's polarized politics, with both parties using the event to shape voter perceptions. The timing, close to the election cycle, amplifies its impact. Economic context. Analysts might note that the timing coincides with economic challenges under the UPND, such as debt restructuring and inflation. The PF could exploit this to contrast Lungu's tenure with Hichilema's. Critical analysis. Without direct expert quotes, these perspectives are speculative but grounded in Zambia's political dynamics. The timing of Lungu's death is likely coincidental, but its political exploitation is strategic, as both parties seek to gain an edge before 2026. 11. What to expect before 2026. Overview and context. Approximate 2,500 words. Looking ahead to the 2026 elections, several developments are likely based on the current situation and Zambia's political trajectory. Below, I outline expectations across political, social, and economic domains. Political developments. PF leadership transition. The PF must select a new presidential candidate, with figures like Given Labinda or Miles Sampa as potential contenders. The process will be contentious, potentially weakening the party if factions emerge. UPND consolidation. The UPND will focus on economic reforms and governance to solidify its base. Hichilema's handling of Lungu's funeral and response to PF's narrative will be critical. Social dynamics. Public sentiment. The funeral's resolution will shape public sentiment. A dignified state funeral could unify Zambians, while continued disputes may deepen divisions. Youth and urban voters. The youth, a key demographic, will be swayed by economic opportunities. The UPND's ability to deliver jobs and the PF's ability to mobilize urban voters will be pivotal. Economic factors. Debt and growth. Zambia's ongoing debt restructuring and IMF program will influence voter perceptions. Economic improvements could bolster the UPND, while setbacks could fuel PF's campaign. Cost of living. High living costs, a major issue in 2021, will remain a flashpoint. Both parties will compete to address this concern. Critical analysis. The period before 2026 will be marked by intense political maneuvering, with the PF leveraging Lungu's legacy and the UPND emphasizing governance. Economic performance and public perception of the funeral's handling will be decisive factors. Conclusion. The controversies surrounding Edgar Lungu's death and funeral reflect Zambia's polarized political landscape, with significant implications for the 2026 elections. The PF is likely strategizing to maintain relevance. The Lungu family is navigating grief and politics, and the UPND is balancing protocol with electoral considerations. The emotional impact on Zambians, combined with strategic and coincidental factors, will shape the political trajectory leading to 2026. While rumors of Lungu's return are unfounded, the broader dynamics highlight the stakes for both parties in a critical election year.